And he said that every morning when I wake up, there's a written invention on the pad. Somebody comes into my room at night and writes down an invention. And the next morning I get up and it's all written out for me. And so I just go to my laboratory and follow the instructions, and I invented radio, or I invented alternating current, or I made this invention or that invention.
I like getting into just the idea of strange forms of communication. That's a lot of what we're talking about. And that has a big overlap with the imaginal realm and where ideas come from. You mentioned writers often feel possessed, and they're kind of a conduit to the information that seems like it's just coming through them. Well, I watched a presentation you gave called A Brief History of Imaginal Machines, and you started it off mentioning that some of the characters Diana Pasulka met in American Cosmic, like Tyler and James, were people that you two met together at Ions. And Tyler is one of those people who says he follows a strict protocol and that the inventions that he patents come to him. They're delivered to him from something else. And I think what's also interesting is that a lot of times it seems like people might make contact with something obscure and bizarre and abstract. And a lot of times that first part of communication is blueprints for a better way to communicate. And that is so interesting. That might speak to Terrence's thoughts on the mushroom, but I think even the story of the Ark of the Covenant is this is a machine built to better talk to God directly. I mean, it has its religious residue, but the idea is the same, that we're often making spontaneous contact with something. It's like, oh, hey, you want to do this more often, do this, this, and this, put this together in these certain ways. Really, you could say that's what magic is. The whole grimoire tradition. Grimoires are phone books of spirits that say, draw the pentagram this way, face east on the full moon, recite these words, call its name, and it shows up. I just think, I've talked to enough people to think that that is a real mechanism in reality. I don't doubt that it's there, but I still find it so bizarre that it's hard to incorporate into a worldview that makes sense. What do you think?
Well, I mean, there's one way to parse it again. When you get around stuff like this, for me, taking things seriously but not literally is almost a kind of like it's almost a principle or like a method of operating in ambiguous situations. Right. And so in this situation, what would be important for me is not simply to say, oh, the world is filled with all sorts of spiritual others that are trying to communicate with us, and these are the mechanisms to do so. It's like, okay, that's the literal story. What's right next to it? And I'm not saying that this is a better way of thinking about it, but it gives us some other interesting things to do. And one is that we don't know, that we're inventing stuff all the time. Like some people might experience themselves as channeling a blueprint or something, but all of the blueprints, all of the ahas, all of the figuring things out that are really significant, game-changing, paradigm-shifting, even just sort of complex, that's all coming from who knows where.
Mm-hmm.
For authors, completely secular people have no interest in any of this stuff. We'll talk about like fiction writers. Oh, the characters are alive. And once I started them going, they kind of had their own thing, and they did surprising things that were surprising to me, or I could hear their voices, blah, blah, blah. Or an even more obvious example that you and I have just been demonstrating for the last hour and a half. We have a sense of what we want to say, but unless we're reading from something, we kind of just open our mouths. And True. If we're paying attention, we might say something we didn't expect. Or I've never said that before. Oh, that's funny. I've used that word. I never used that word. Like there's something even in language itself that is creative beyond our control. So what I'm saying is that human creativity, technological, fictional, religious, even verbal, is outside of our control in some ways. And so in some way, I think that we can look at this stuff as being like formalized structures for understanding or reproducing that human capacity to get creative impulses from beyond our control. Because you have to think about the fact that if you're going to start talking about these channeled machines, let's call them, where what you're getting is like the diagram for how to build the machine that then is going to help you go that. And I talk about this at great length in the High Weirdness when I'm talking about Terence and Dennis's sort of protocol for the experiment, which is kind of building a machine as ritual drug, molecular machine that then allows this kind of mind meld, is that while it certainly supported a really powerful psychedelic experience, it didn't really like pan out as a real machine. And if you go into New Age literature, you find tons of devices that have been channeled, and sometimes they might do something or other. But a lot of times it's just kind of like a fiction, or maybe a fiction that has a certain sacred power, like has a certain ritual power, but would not register in, at least in any of our rational ways of understanding how machines kind of operate. So what's interesting to me here is that while it looks kind of like, downloading a machine that actually works, there's also this zone where you're downloading a machine that lets you sort of go more into this weird world of suggestion and living fictions and synchronicities and dreamlike convictions, and those two are not, they overlap, but they're not the same thing. And there's sort of it's I think what I'm saying, I guess another way of saying it is that these occult mechanisms or new age mechanisms are, in a way, they're like riffing on the human capacity to actually generate novel technological or procedural developments that actually change the world. And so it's like we that's a pattern, and then these other things are like they're versions of that, because there's machines and all sorts of these things. And I think you're totally right to see, like, the grimoire tradition is in part you're just setting up an apparatus that's going to allow a certain kind of communication, and some people who do that apparatus have positive results, a lot of people don't, and then you're just sort of in this weird parallel world that at the bottom is just the fact that human beings are these strange open creatures that are capable of ingenuity, or of channeling ingenuity, or of creatively manifesting novelty in the universe in a way that actually changes the universe. Mm-hmm. And that's just a remarkable and very strange position that we're all in, and that these are kind of almost like esoteric riffs on that process.
Yeah, I see what you're saying there. And there's a lot to be said about belief and expectation, especially in magic. A lot of scholars of magic, ceremonial magic, would say that the robes and the dagger and the pageantry is to get you into a mindset of belief, essentially. And we know placebo works. Some people are healed when they think they take a medicine, and all evidence points to that wasn't anything significant, but yet it works. So obviously, when people say consciousness is primary, I tend to believe them, because that's what some of that evidence seems to show. I think that's why we can push up against reality a little bit with mushrooms, or, with any psychedelic, with rituals and the power of belief. There's another line from the book where you're talking about magic, and this is kind of in the vein of an explanation, but you write, the world of participation plunges the individual into a collective sea that erodes the barrier between human agency and the surrounding environment. In this world, which I'm associating with the magical paradigm, language and ritual do not objectively delineate the world, but help bring it into being. Objects are organized according to symbolic resemblances and the rhetoric of dream. rather than the dry and objective classifications that pack scientific texts or corporate reports. And I like it. The rhetoric of dream and symbolic resemblances might not be exactly clear terms to everybody, but I kind of think reality is best described as a shared dream. I can't think of much of a better explanation. What do you think?
I think, dream is a very, very helpful. It's a very, very helpful practice to think about. It's in a way to really grapple with the nature of dreaming and to understand in a way how the world that we experience together is kind of like a social dream. And even the fact that, even according to brain science, that the process that's creating my visual perception right now is not really different than the process of creating a fantastic other world in a dream, in the sense that from the brain side, it's doing more or less the same thing, which is like fabricating a virtual reality that I'm living within. This is like kind of one of the dominant neuroscience, modes right now, is that there's a kind of predictive processing that's booting up a kind of virtual world rather than directly mirroring all of the sense information coming in. But unlike the nighttime, in the day, I am getting sensory feedback that's correcting for this kind of onboard dreaming that I'm doing. And obviously in that story, there's other people. And presumably they're doing the same thing at the same time. So we're already enmeshed in a kind of like overlapping collective domain of dreaming together.
Can you believe it, people? A video clip and a peek into how that sweet THC sausage is made. For some people, I'm sure it's nice to put a face to the name, so I started making clips that are a little more YouTube friendly than the full show tends to be. Get the full show on any podcasting platform. I prefer to keep it audio only, so we have a more decentralized distribution for a controversial show, and also so I can edit out the ums and ahs and barking dogs and all the things that happen when a person records in their home environment. And then if you really like the show, you can sign up for THC Plus, and instead of 1 hour interviews, you get the full 2 hour interview for just $8. I think that's a better deal, more of a win-win than asking you to support the show by booking a therapy session or buying generic Viagra. It's getting weird out there, folks. So just go to the highersidechats.com or click the link at the top of any set of show notes, and all your wildest dreams will come true. All right? All right. The Higherside Chat Show.